including at the University of London and also as a columnist of The Guardian. And you were briefly a politician in the sense of member of the Greek Parliament for Syriza, which you quit over the bailout deal of July 2015. But before we get to bailout politics, maybe we can also, as I don't know whether you already there, start a bit with the spatial experience of Europe. Of course, Greece is within the European Union, but still, like we've also had guests from the UK who told us that when they went to Europe, it's like going to the continent. How is that in Greece? This is Greece in Europe or not, or is this changing?
Greeks have always said, have always imagined Europe as this place out there, to which Greece belonged, but also didn't belong. When I was growing up in Greece, people used to go to Germany or to France, and they went to Europe. That's the expression. So Greece belongs, but it also doesn't belong. It knows that it is, obviously, Europe is a Greek word, but it knows that it's not really 100% a member of that idea or that whatever it is. And recently it's been confirmed that this is the case.
It's even been confirmed in a way with another Greek word, a nasty word, which is periphery. There's this, including in the Euro crisis, this spatial logic of a center and a periphery of countries in crisis has very much set frame.
More than a periphery, actually. I heard your previous guests talking about the buffer zone. Turkey is indeed a buffer zone, and the European Union creates a lot of buffer zones around it. It's Fortress Europe, but Greece is now a buffer zone within the Eurozone, within the European Union.
It's for refugees, you mean?
For refugees, yes. So although it's a member of the Union, it's also a buffer zone, the way the refugee issue has been handled. So that spatially, again, confirms some suspicions that...
Well, I think that here we have to be, of course, very precise that partly the objective of this horse trade deal with Turkey was to avoid that Greece would be the buffer zone for all the refugees, because the Balkan route of refugees was already closed and the Aegean route was still open, so all refugees were arriving in Greece. And basically, by putting forward this outer border to the Turkish-Greek border, it was a way to help Greece, at least even in the mind of those who designed the plan. And we had one politician this evening
who closed the Balkan route.
The Balkan leaders.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and the European Union.
Do you really think that the leaders of Macedonia or the leaders of the small countries in the Balkans would have taken such a momentous decision to block the path of desperate and destitute people from the south without the connivance of powerful people from...
No, there were definitely talks, yes.
So clearly those who closed the border were not the Balkan leaders. The Balkan leaders, of course, acceded to it, but this was a decision taken at the heart of European power. So really, this was a deal that was decided in the absence of Greece, or at least with Greece playing a minor role. And then, in some ways, Turkey was treated more as a serious partner than Greece was in this. So clearly a buffer zone. From my perspective and the perspective of many Greeks. In the Union, but not quite, and your borders are Union borders, but not quite. It depends on what the issue is.
Mm-hmm. How do you look upon the story we've just been talking about, the Taksim Square, and for a long time Turks and Greeks didn't have a very good diplomatic relation, to say the least. And if you hear this story, because I saw you sitting there, how do you look upon that? About sort of the lost opportunity of Turkey the lost perspective we're talking about, of entering Europe. How do you look upon from the Greek side of the Aegean Sea on that
Sure. My view is not typical. So then whose view?
Well, but I'm asking you.
It didn't. Well, it doesn't surprise me because I mean, apart from everything else, I've lived in Britain for nearly 4 decades.
So it's an outcome you don't think is surprising.
It doesn't surprise me in the slightest. No, and it's a very cynical behaviour towards Turkey, and shows hidden suspicion and lack of trust and everything else. Anybody who has lived in Western Europe will know exactly what I mean. So it doesn't surprise me in the slightest. But of course it is a missed opportunity, because in many ways Turkey is part of Europe and has always been part of Europe. So it could have normalized affairs, it could have created a different environment. He hasn't. They failed to do it, and suspicion has prevailed. And now it's a matter of power politics, fundamentally. From the perspective of the Greeks, the politics is complex, because obviously there are people who would like a border to be there between Europe and Turkey.
Yeah.
I don't share that, because I think that's very dangerous. But
what's the danger?
it's never very good to be next to the buffer zone.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
From my perspective, it's a short-sighted thing, but that's how politics, power politics works in Europe.
And would you agree with their assessment that it will not turn around? Turkey will
I see no evidence at all that this will change. Mostly for domestic reasons in Turkey. Turkey's had strong growth the last few years. Is that better? Turkey's had strong growth the last few years. There's a new regime, new kind of ruling layers have emerged, mostly from Anatolia. The old ruling elite is less powerful. It's changed itself. It looks elsewhere culturally and otherwise. It feels more confident. It feels more powerful. So it needs less Europe or whatever that means.
Yeah, but that's very interesting what you're saying. You're saying it's also the Anatolian elite which is taking over the old elite, which was more the Taksim European. Is that what you meant? So that geopolitics follow also the fact that there's a new elite who's actually from another part of Turkey?
It's not just another part of Turkey, as I understand it. It's also different activities, different business, different economic power. So that creates a different setup with different worldview. It's more traditional, more conservative. Obviously, that mixes with the old ruling layers in Turkey. What will come out, we don't know. Yes, well. So and you see it in politics, and Turkey obviously draws its own conclusions, see how Europe treats it, and it will do other things.
Sorry, I was just digressing into Turkey.
No, it's interesting. It brings a nice connection in the conversation, but I also would like to get back to your political experience in these 7-8 months in the Greek Parliament. And to know how you look back upon it now, was it a very strange or surprising or perhaps funny experience sometimes, or was it painful? Or
I don't recommend it.
I mean, have you been disappointed in the working of democracy, of parliamentary democracy?
God, yeah. When you see that close quarters...
This session is called Critical Mirrors, that's why I'm asking.
You wouldn't get anything other than that from this. When you see the workings of parliamentary democracy at close quarters, you cannot but be disappointed, especially in this day and age. I haven't heard so much hot air all my life. I mean, it's just endless talking with very little substance in the end, because the big decisions have already been made. Parliamentary debate doesn't mean much. And Greece takes its parliament very seriously. You mustn't think. Of the European countries, it takes its parliament far more seriously than most. If that's serious, then God knows what parliaments are like elsewhere. So it's not...
But would you accept a position in government? hypothesis.
I don't think there was
And,
any...
I mean, was the difference there between the government and the parliament?
I don't think there was any danger of that.
No, well, you never know.
Because
It's a wild landscape in Greece at the moment.
Yeah, that's right. But my own views were quite different from the majority views in Syriza, arguing for Greek exit from the Eurozone. So I don't think there was any risk that... But power in government, again, that's a very strange thing when you see it close up. It can be very cynical, it can be very cold, and it can be it's two-faced. I mean, it's almost like in this day and age in Europe, you've got to be able to dissemble professionally to be in politics. It's a very cold, alien, distant politics from the majority of people. And this was a party and this was a government that presumably spoke for a mass movement, and it was different. In the end.
But it was also a very, very difficult period full of negotiations with 18 other countries, Troika on the euro. Did that also impact your view on the rest of Europe?
Yeah, greatly, I think. Because
And also that of Greek citizens more widely?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of Greece more widely. I think the impact was great because Europe as an idea, as I say, when I was growing up, when I was a little boy, Europe was this mythical place out there to which you went where great things came from. And to a lot of Greeks, it remained so, and there was a sustained campaign the last 2-3 decades of Europe as this wonderful place to which we wish to belong, and if you really want to make yourself more cultured, more civilized, more better off. This was a matter of identity, and that identity became closely related to money. Money does that. Money is identity. So having the euro was like being 100% European, proper European, not a little bit,
Right.
kind of, not peripheral anyway. The experience of the last few years, especially the experience of the negotiations and the way the country has been treated, basically the negation of democracy on a grand scale, quite obvious negation of democracy, and the negation of national sovereignty has ruined that. There's, the anti-Europe sense in Greece now is phenomenal. I've never seen it like that before.
Europe or Euro? Europe.
Anti-Europe.
Yes.
Funnily enough, it's less anti-Euro than anti-Europe, because anti-Euro also means losing your pension or losing your savings. People can make that calculation. But you have a sense of being very angry with Europe, and this is, I've never seen it like that before. Never seen it like that. A sense that these people are bossing us around. There's no solidarity. They're constantly telling us what to do. They're imposing these awful measures on us, and so on. That's the.
Well, yeah, I think to all of us here who watched it, it came clearly out. Also in the referendum itself, with the 60% no vote, was also a sign of people willing to regain, in a way, their sovereignty. That's what it partly expressed, perhaps more even than a statement on the bailout.
I think sovereignty is the key issue here, and Greece brought it out. Sovereignty has been a key issue in Europe for a long time. What is the nation state? What is the union? What is the relationship between the two? What is the role of the European institutions? And what is the role of the local or more democratically elected power? And Greece brought it out vividly. And from my perspective, it's perfectly clear that Europe needs a dose of national sovereignty again.
So, just to clarify, you still favor the Grexit, but basically, do you think that's a good idea for Greece, or do you think that the euro is a bad idea as such for everybody?
I think the euro has failed. And I think, look at the debate, recreating Europe. This is the issue of the...
Have to start somewhere.
But why do you want to recreate something that works well? I mean, the fact that you're talking about recreating, rethinking it, reconsidering, it means that everybody knows that something's gone wrong, right? Something doesn't work. As the English say, usually you let sleeping dogs... If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Yeah, if it ain't broke, you don't fix it, you let sleeping dogs lie. So if we're thinking of fixing it, then it's gone wrong. And what's gone wrong? Many things have gone wrong. Not that it was perfect before, but clearly the attempt to create a monetary union has backfired. It doesn't work. And money does that in peculiar, insidious, quiet, underhand ways. And that's what we're experiencing. So that is the general diagnosis from my perspective. In the case of Greece, it's just a disaster. It's just a complete disaster. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. And the notion that the country is turning around is just laughable and absolutely ludicrous. I mean, it's just a disaster,
But how can the people, I mean, you say they're not against the euro, but against Europe. That's a bit like having both your cookie and eat it, isn't it?
I know.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, this has been a period of the most incredible contradictions in terms of how people approach these things. And that's not just the Greeks. I think everybody's like that in Europe. You can hold 2, 3, 4 completely contradictory ideas in your head about what needs doing. We don't want the bailout measures, and we will fight against them, but we want the euro. Well,
so the money, so the bailout measures. That's and you're saying probably rightly so that one of the main problems is the issue of sovereignty, which isn't solved. It's stuck somewhere halfway between the nation state and the central European institutions. That worked very well for quite a while when everything was going well, because we didn't have to be very clear about it. Are you? I'm not saying that you are, but am I mistaken if I'm hearing that you say, well, put it back into the national state?
I think that if we're going to have a debate, and you're doing the right thing here, that should be a main element of the debate. I don't think the answer is obvious. But then that's why you need a debate.
Exactly.
If the answer is obvious, I'll give you the answer and we'll go home, right? So
or we might disagree or whatever.
So that's exactly the debate we need, and that's exactly the debate that the whole of Europe needs. Where to draw the line? Because obviously we don't want to go back to a world of competing, warring nation states.
It's not very appealing,
and I don't think we would anyway. I don't think that's...
it's not even a possibility, maybe.
Yeah, I think that it would be very difficult to do that, given how Europe is. But equally, the notion of a united Europe, the Maastricht Agreement, everything else, creating whatever it is, that doesn't work either. And it will not work. So the question is, where is the element of sovereignty? Where should it be drawn? And the key thing here is democracy as well. Because it isn't, what became very clear for me in Greece is that the loss of sovereignty also meant loss of democracy. And that's the most important thing. Sovereignty isn't a transcendental good, that the Greeks are the Greeks and the Italians are everybody. Sovereignty has Sovereignty has to do with democracy. There is no democracy without sovereignty. If you don't feel in command of your own place, your own area, your own country, then democracy itself.
So are you pointing to the fact that that we should better the democracy in Europe?
I think that the meaning of democracy in Europe should go together with sovereignty. There is no European people, and there will never be a European people. And why should there be a European people? Right? There is
never is a long time, though.
Well, indeed. I don't know what might happen in about 5,000 years, but
fair enough.
For the moment, I don't think that... so really, we need to be thinking of that. What exactly is the content of democracy and sovereignty, and how do they combine at the transnational and at the national level? We haven't done that very well.
Yeah, you're right. We have often proceeded more by fait accompli, by saying, well, we cannot talk about it because we have already decided this, and the euro is untouchable. And I think you're right to say that this discussion needs to be held with all cards on the table, as it were, and not with foregone conclusions, because that would be the only, or at least the best way also for, if we decide that we want to keep what we have, for people to rally also to that decision in a democratic manner.
I think what has to be appreciated is that the European Monetary Union is a very powerful set of institutions, and to defend it, which has become the main task of Europe the last 5-6 years, to defend that, Europe has had to create new institutions, and it's had to rebalance the old institutions in ways which are very, very deeply problematic. For instance, the Council of Ministers in Europe is now far more powerful than it used to be, and that's undemocratic, and that is to defend the euro.
Well, you could say that the ministers are democratically put into place. I mean, some of them are elected directly.
They're closer to national sovereignty than.
Indeed, but again, what is the relationship between that and Parliament, the European Parliament? And there's been a rebalancing of power in favour of the ministers and against Parliament. And when you look
against European Parliament,
yes.
Okay.
And when you look at the European Stability Mechanism, for instance, the ESM, which has been created to defend the euro,
rescue fund, yeah.
That's a vastly powerful and rich organisation with hundreds of billions of euro in the bank. Who is it accountable to? No one, as far as I can work out. So these are outcomes of the last few years, and they show that these are concrete instances of the retreat of democracy. This isn't some kind of abstract idea. It's happening, even as, and that is to defend this system and to defend the interests behind the system, because there are interests here. So.
Okay. Thank you for sharing
All right.
these critical insights with us. It was a great pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much.
I'd like to invite the next